the end of time, death. These are the heavy and dark themes that are dealt with in the final book in the Chronicles of Narnia. And never have I picked up a book and read about such heavy and dark things and then finished that book with so much hope and with so much joy. It's incredible. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my spoiler talk theological book review for the Chronicles of Narnia, The Last Battle. And that term last there, this really is it. This is the last book in the Chronicles of Narnia. My last couple videos, I've talked about there's two orders you could read Narnia in. There's the order C.S. Lewis wrote it in, and then there's the chronological order. So I have both those orders listed in my description, and it's fine to read it in either order, but no matter how you slice it, The Last Battle, it is the final book in the Chronicles of Narnia series. And it is a deep, deep book. It deals with such heavy themes as the end of the world and death. And it takes these heavy, dark themes, and I felt like when I read it, every time I read this book, and I've read it multiple times now, with both of those heavy themes, I walk out feeling a sense of hope and a sense of joy. And even the last time I read it, I was like, could the world end tomorrow? I mean, seriously, it's amazing how C.S. Lewis, using his imagination and making up this fantasy world, is able to explore these deeper biblical themes and giving us so much hope, because that's what it is with Jesus. It's hope. Even in the darkest, heaviest, worst circumstances, it's hope. And we get that presented to us in this book, The Last Battle. Now, since it's the end of the world book, in all Christian movies that I've ever watched, and all Christian literature I've ever read that deals with the last days and the last things, they always have an
Antichrist.
This one has a false Aslan. But C.S. Lewis's take on that, his take on the Antichrist, his take on the false Aslan, is an incredibly interesting take. For instance, the way this book opens, we open with two characters living by this waterfall. Character number one is an ape, and his name is Shift. His name is Shift because he's a jerk, he's evil, he's a very shifty character, so he is very aptly named. Then you have this donkey, and his name is Puzzle, probably because he's just always puzzled all the time. Now the thing is, Puzzle thinks he's an idiot, and he thinks Shift is a genius, so whatever Shift says, he does. But here's the truth. Puzzle is not an idiot, and he's smarter than he gives himself credit for. But Shift keeps insulting him. Shift keeps hurting him. Shift keeps putting him down in such a way that Puzzle keeps looking to him for leadership and affirmation, feeling like this is the only way he can truly live, is to obey Shift and do what Shift does. See, Shift is mean and cruel. Puzzle has a very kind heart. He's not allowing himself to believe in the best of himself. And the best example of this, right here in the opening, this lion skin washes over the waterfall and falls into the, cauldron, the pool that they're right by. And, the ape looks at that and he goes, hey, Puzzle, go out there and get me that lion skin. The huge waterfall barreling down into the water here, right? And an ape has arms and legs, and their feet are like hands. So it's like they got 4 hands. Of course, it would be easiest for Shift to swim out and get the suit and bring it back, the lion skin, and bring it back. For Puzzle, that'd be difficult because he's got 4 hooves, no hands, no arms. He'd be like half drowned and trying to drag it back with his mouth. Puzzle brings that up, right? And Shift goes, okay, I'll go get it then, but how selfish of you, Puzzle, to not think about us apes who have such weak chests. When I go into that freezing cold water, I'm bound to get a cold. I'm bound to get sick and suffer and die. Oh, woe's me, Puzzle. All right. You didn't think about it, but to spare you, I'll go. And then Puzzle's like, no. Please promise me, Shift, you won't do it. Promise me, I'll go get the lion skin. Promise me. It's in this way that Shift is a manipulator. He wants to be served. He wants wealth. He wants Everybody just to serve him and obey him. And in finding this lion skin, see, the interesting thing about this book is we are now 200 years after the events of the silver chair. So it's been a couple hundred years. And nothing magical like that has really happened since then. Aslan hasn't manifested in Narnia the way that he's come into Narnia throughout the rest of the Chronicles. They've gone now a couple hundred years and no one has seen Aslan. Most have never even seen just a regular lion. And every day kind of just goes on like any normal day. So like no big, huge miracles, magical things or anything like that. Just every day, it's just a normal day, day after day, day after day. And so Shift wants to take advantage of that. Because since nobody really has seen a lion, so what he does is he takes this lion skin and he drapes it over Puzzle and kind of makes the lion skin a coat for Puzzle. And his big idea is to, in Aslan's name, with this donkey in disguise, to make people serve him. This is where Puzzle is smarter than he lets on, because Puzzle says, no, Aslan would not want that. And just as this happens, there is this earthquake and a clap of thunder. And Puzzle says, see, that is Aslan. Aslan is giving us an omen. This is bad. We cannot go through with this plan. And Shift says, seriously, I was just about to pray. It was on my lips to say, oh, Aslan, if it is your will to go forth in your name to fix Narnia with this donkey dressed as you, then please send us a thunderclap and send us a tremor. But I didn't even get the chance to get the words out of my mouth. Just as I opened my mouth to say it, it happened. You must do it now, Puzzle. You can't fight the will of Aslan. It's worded a little bit different in the book, but this is like the idea. This is how Shift manipulates. And he's beaten down Puzzle so much that even though Puzzle knows what's right, he goes, well, I am dumb and he is smart, so I should follow him. And so what we see in the Antichrist archetype in Narnia is it's not really one Antichrist. You have one good-hearted donkey who's forced to wear this lion skin and one manipulative ape who happens to be in touch with the Tizrock of Calormen. Now, I talk more about Calormen in my video, The Horse and His Boy, so if you want more on that, you can check that out. But as a quick sum up, they live across the desert, they're ancient enemies of Narnia, they hate Narnia, and they serve a god named Tash, who is this like vulture creature, and he thrives off the blood of human sacrifice. He is an evil, wicked, vile god, and those that follow him tend to be evil, wicked, and vile. And so that's Calormen. And so he's in touch with Calormen, and what he's going to do is use the name of Aslan to manipulate the Narnians and bring the Calormen over and hand over Narnia to the Calormen. So what this becomes is more or less a false Aslan system, an Antichrist system, where it's not one in particular individual is the Antichrist, but it's taking the name of Aslan, and it's taking the name of Tash, and it's manipulating it to get what he wants. So in other words, it's really like he's taking religion to manipulate the hearts and minds of those in Narnia to deceive, if possible, even the elect. It's exactly what Revelation talks about when it talks about like the beast and then, you know, the false prophet, and how the false prophet is going to do like these signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. And so that's what this is. You see how false all of this is. In fact, it's so see-through that really if the animals of Narnia got close enough, they could see this is just a donkey in a lion skin. This is ridiculous. That's how see-through it really is on the surface. But Shift only has Puzzle come out at nighttime with a huge bonfire, so he's kind of distorted. He keeps the Narnians at a distance, so really all they can kind of make out is a little bit of like the gold of the lion's skin, and then Shift is the mouthpiece of Aslan, and he will speak the will of Aslan to the people to get what he wants. And the thing that's very cunning about all of this is Narnia gets overtaken by the Calormen not by a great battle, and not by a great war. It gets taken over by the Calormen through words. It happens so subtly that the king, the final king of Narnia, Tyrion, doesn't even notice it happening. That is the crazy thing about taking the name of Aslan and twisting it to to get what they want. And of course, the Calormen were right on it because they've always wanted these free provinces of Archenland and Narnia. They've always wanted to take them captive. And now that this ape has found a way to manipulate them, that they will even obey the voice of Aslan over the voice of the king, which even the king would agree that's how it should be, he can go ahead and take this over under the king's nose. I mean, when we meet King Tyrion, and he's with his best friend Jewel, who's a unicorn, and they're kind of like on vacation, and they're kind of just sitting there talking about how amazing it is that Aslan is here. All they've heard is the rumor. So some amount of time has passed when we meet Shift and when we meet Puzzle to this point where we see Tyrion. We don't know how much time it is, but it's enough time that the Calormen have been coming over in disguise as merchants. And then once they get over here, Shift says, in the name of Aslan, you will serve them, and slowly they're going into slavery to the Calormen, and it's happening so slow but so subtly under the king's nose that he's on vacation with his best bud, and they're just talking about how exciting it is that Aslan is in the land, that they haven't heard anything like this in hundreds and hundreds of years. Just the wonder of wonders that this would be happening now, until this centaur Roomwit shows up, and he's like, this can't be right. The stars don't lie, and they're foretelling some great danger. So Roomwit's trying to convince them that this can't be the real Aslan. And the king's like, well, who would ever do stuff like this in his name and claim to be him? That's like the highest blasphemy. Who would ever do this? The thing that kind of convinces the king something is up is finally a tree spirit comes to him and dies in front of him, because wherever the tree's actual trunk was, a Calormen finally cut it down. And when it dies in pain in front of Tyrion, this rage fills him and fills his friend Jewel. So he says to the centaur, go back to Cair Paravel and bring my army and meet me over at Stable Hill, where the stable is. Because, they kind of knew where Aslan was. They just hadn't gone over there yet. And so now, finally, he's going to investigate. Because it's like, wow, if Aslan's here, he's not a tame lion. He can do what he wants. He can communicate with me when he wants. If he wants to come in here and talk to the people first, fine. He's not a tame lion. But now he's starting to feel suspicious when a Narnian dies in front of him. What he should have done is gone to Cair Paravel himself and rallied his army together. C.S. Lewis takes care in the book to say great evil came out of the king's rashness. The fact that he didn't go back to Cair Paravel and do his duty. The fact that he went straight in anger to see what was going on without the aid of his army led to all kinds of bad stuff. Now, the world was going to end one way or the other. Like, that was going to happen. But it didn't have to unfold the way that it unfolded. We'll never know now, and we're never told how it would have been. We only have what is now and the choices we'll make now. So King Tyrion is enraged because when he gets to Stable Hill, what he ends up seeing is Calormen on his soil, in his province, on his country, enslaving his people. And when he talks to his people, they're like, this is Aslan's orders. I mean, yeah, this sucks. We don't understand what we did to anger Aslan, so we must have done something. But this is Aslan's orders. See, again, what did we do to anger Aslan? That is Shift's way of manipulation. The way he beat down the will of Puzzle. So you have this captain, Rishda Tarkin, and he's the captain, kind of the representative of the Tizrock of Calormen, or the king of Calormen. He's the captain sent over to help with this silent, honorless takeover of Narnia. Basically, the enemies of Narnia are coming in slowly because of how this ape is beating down the Narnians the way that he beat down Puzzle, all of Puzzle's life. He's angry with you. His wrath is against you. Of course, he's not telling them what they did to upset Aslan. So he's playing on the general guilt that, none of us is perfect. And so he's playing on that. And that the wrath of Aslan is against them. It's burning against them. Now they must serve the Tizrock. Now they must serve that country. And a lot of stuff happens when the king comes in here, just rash, without his army. But finally, he ends up captured by the Calormen because he surrenders himself because he felt like he just was dishonorable in the way he fought some of them and snuck up on them rather than giving them clear defiance. And while he's being held prisoner, the ape is just, he's in a rant. And the captain from the Calormen is just kind of standing there like laughing and enjoying this. And you have this cat named Ginger, who doesn't believe in Aslan, who doesn't believe in Tash, who doesn't believe in anything spiritual or supernatural because he's too smart to believe in such fairy tales. And he's kind of slowly working his way into their council during this moment. But when the king steps in here, the people are gathering and they're starting to ask questions. The best question comes from this little lamb. That's not symbolic, right? Yeah, so this little lamb comes up and asks the ape this question because the ape has basically said, hey, look, here's the deal. I know a lot of you are saying, all right, let's just do this job And once we get it done, we could go back to being free the way Aslan wants us to be free, because we're just doing this job that Aslan wants. And the ape is like, no. You're working for the rest of your life. Most of you are going to go to Calormen. Most of you are going to work in the Tisroc's mine. And you won't be slaves. You will get paid. Well, I mean, you won't actually get the money. It's going to go into the treasury of Aslan so that it could go for the common good of everybody. And so after this is told, this little lamb comes up and it's like, well, why would Aslan do this? That's not Aslan's character. The Calormen serve this god Tash, who thrives off the blood of human sacrifice, right? And that's not what Aslan's like, so how could those two be friends? How could those two possibly work together? And finally, the ape comes up with this clever, cunning lie, and he says, Aslan and Tash are exactly the same. It's different words to describe the same person. Seriously, people, do we have to beat your head over that? I mean, come on. Is it really right to sit here and say we're right and they're wrong? No, okay? Aslan and Tash, 2 words for the exact same thing. They are one and the same.
So you had better get your act together, you little lamb.
And King Tyrion almost turns the tides. He opens his mouth and he's about to say, well, how could they be one and the same? Because Tash thrives off the blood of human sacrifice, and Aslan shed his blood to save all Narnia. And I love how C.S. Lewis words it, because if perhaps he had gotten those words out of his mouth, maybe the tide would have turned right then and right there. Instead, they knock him right out, so he never gets those words out. It's actually quite tragic, like the way these events are unfolding. And the king of Narnia gets tied to a dang tree. Again, what battle has been fought? What war? Slowly, piece by piece, like a frog in a pot of boiling water. When you turn the water up slowly, the frog doesn't move. It stays there until the water boils. Slowly and cleverly, cunningly, the ape invited the Calormen over. Slowly and cunningly, the ape deceived the people with the name Aslan, distorting his words and distorting his character. And this is another one of the scenes that I find so clever, because one of the things I like about Narnia is each book they find a different way to bring the sons of Adam and daughters of Eve into Narnia. Now, the way it mostly goes, other than the horse and his boy, is it's from our perspective. On our Earth in the 1940s during World War II, on our Earth, we see them going through whatever they're going through, and either they ask to go there and Aslan opens the door, they stumble upon it through a picture frame or a wardrobe or magic rings. I don't know. Somehow they find a way in. This time they come because King Tyrion prays. He knows the true heart and character of Aslan, and that Aslan is not who this ape is saying. So he calls out to Aslan and says, help us, or bring the children from the other world, because he was thinking about it. As he's tied to that tree, he's going over in his mind the stories of his great-great-great-great-grandfather Rilian, and how Jill and Eustace came to save him, going further back to the Dawn Treader, further back to Prince Caspian, further back to Aslan dying on the stone table and the High King Peter, further back to King Frank and Anne, and all these times. You know what this is like? This is like the Word. When we're going through those tough circumstances and we start to churn over the Bible stories in our mind. We start to churn over how God moved in the past. We start to churn over how God moved in these Bible heroes' lives, and how God worked and how God spoke and what God did. And as we churn over God's promises in our minds and get them in our minds and start repeating them, it becomes that foundation for us to stand on. This is what was going on here, because he's churning over these stories, and then he cries out to Aslan, asking for Aslan to come and asking for Aslan to send the sons of Adam and daughters of Eve, asking Aslan to give him the voice to cry out across the worlds for them to come. And Aslan grants it. He falls into a vision, or what he thought was a vision, and really he sees our world as plain as day, and happens to be there at the time when all, except Susan, all the characters, all the children from all of the books that have entered Narnia are all together having a Narnia party, because nobody else understands this stuff. So they got together to have a conversation about it, and boom, the last king of Narnia pops up in their room like a ghost, and they know something is wrong. So they make a plan. They're gonna get Diggory's golden rings that are still buried in that yard, even though it's not his house anymore. Those rings are still buried in the ground. I would think Diggory would unbury those rings, take them with him, and bury them wherever he moves. That's too sacred of a thing, too scary of a thing to leave to chance. That's kind of the biggest weakness I see in this. However, it's not that weak because it's fun, because Peter and Edmund, they get the rings. They're going to give them to Jill and Eustace because they're the only ones. Aslan hasn't said you can't come back. Everybody else is too old, and he says you're not going back to Narnia. So they're trying to be respectful and obedient, but also answer the call. So, like, it's really cool how that unfolds. And when the king wakes up from that vision, Jill and Eustace are right there in front of him. Like, he prayed, 1 second later, Jill and Eustace were there. It was like a week in our world's time of them planning and getting things together. So it's really interesting because this time we saw it through Narnia's perspective, through the king's perspective, and they came because he prayed and he asked. So that was a really interesting concept. The next concept that I find incredibly interesting is skipping ahead a little bit. You know, the king gets set free. He saves his friend Jewel. They actually get Puzzle out of the stable. They leave the lion skin on him because when they see, like, this is it, this is the false Aslan. Okay, let's leave the lion skin on him and let's show Puzzle to all Narnia so they could see what was really fooling them. And this whole thing is over. Everybody will see the truth and believe in Aslan again. And guess what happens? They run into these dwarves that are being taken captive by the Calormen. They take out the Calormen, they save the dwarves, they show the dwarves Puzzle, and these dwarves look at Puzzle and they go,
"Oh, you've got to be kidding me. You're it?"
Okay, so the ape took us in with that Aslan, but you're still proclaiming there is an Aslan? Okay, produce your Aslan then. And the king's like, what? I can't produce Aslan. He's not a tame lion. He made a mistake in saying that, because as soon as he said it, the dwarves went,
"Bits and bedsteads."
You sound just like that other lot. The dwarves are for the dwarves. We don't serve Aslan, this fairy tale creature. We don't serve you, your king, who wants to drag us into your religion. And we don't serve the ape, who wants to drag us into his religion. We're done with that manipulation. The dwarves are for the dwarves. And then, I love this scene. They're at their camp, and Tash shows up. And just the 2 seconds that it runs by, it changed the atmosphere, it changed the air, it took the breath out of their lungs. It was a frightening sight to behold as Tash was running through the land of Narnia, running towards Stable Hill, not even giving them a second look. When Rishta Tarkin is talking with Ginger the cat, neither of them believe in the supernatural. Neither of them believe in Tash or Aslan. They don't believe in either one. But Rishta Tarkin is calling on Tash. And he's calling on Tash by calling Aslan Tashland. And so making them one and the same. And now the real Tash has showed up. And I think that's an awesome moment in the book where they were marked like, and this fool of an ape who didn't believe in Tash will get more than he bargained for. He called for Tash.
Tash has come.
People shouldn't call for
Demons.
unless they really mean what they say. Well, then the worst news possible comes. This is why Tyrion shouldn't have acted rashly. This is why Tyrion should have gone to Cair Paravel with Runewit at the beginning. Because while everybody was focused on the false Aslan, with the king tied to a tree because he went to where he went, everybody was distracted with over here, but over here now, the rest of the Calormen came in. No more playing around, no more coming in disguise. They came in and killed everybody in Cair Paravel. Farsight the eagle survives, he lands, and he says Narnia is fallen. This section of the book is what I call the section of truth, because this is really where the lies come down, where all the wool that has been pulled over everybody's eyes comes off. And what's so interesting about this is they have this stable. So just to sort of set this up, it's the stable on this hill. And when Puzzle was gone, they had to come up with a new lie. Now, the ape doesn't care about anything anymore. Like, all he cares about, he's getting all the service. So he's got all the bananas, all the nuts, and all the alcohol that he wants. So he's fat, lazy, and he's drunk. So really, his authority is pretty much eroded. It's just Rishta, Tarkin, and Ginger. These are the two that are now running things. These are the two that are keeping the deception alive. But since the ape has been the mouthpiece, they teach the ape what to say now, and the ape comes out and says what they teach him. So the ape comes out and he says, hey, Aslan's not coming out tonight because you've really ticked him off. A donkey is wearing a lion's skin, walking around, claiming he is Aslan. So if you want to, go into the stable. And what they had set up was one of the Calormen was inside the stable by the door and was going to kill anybody that was not in the know. So Ginger the cat decides he's going to go in there. This is the first set of wool that is pulled off the eyes. Ginger, who believes in nothing, takes a step into the stable, and there he is. Not Aslan, no, Tash. And it freaks that cat out so much, he shoots out like a freaking orange bullet and hides up in the tree, and then he can't talk anymore. He can't articulate. He falls so deep into his own deception, and now seeing the true Tash right there, he reverts back to being a dumb animal. And it throws the rest of the Narnians into such panic that it actually plays into the deception. And they're like, nope, we aren't gonna go in there. We won't do it. Oh, please, Master Shift, speak to Aslan on our behalf. Please be the go-between. We daren't face him. That's how deceived that they had become because they forgot about the true heart of Aslan. Finally, this guy Imith, who's a Calormen, a servant of Tash, comes up and says, my desire all my life has been to see Tash face to face. And Rishta doesn't want Imith to go in there. He needs all the soldiers he can get. But everybody's like, well, why won't you let your own man go in there? So finally, Rishta says, fine, go in there. Go in there. He's angry, but go ahead and go in there. And Imith goes in there and has a different experience. He sees that soldier that's in there and kills that soldier and casts his body out. But when that soldier's body comes flying out, everybody thinks it's the dead Imith. So now they're 10 times more scared that Aslan's angry. But we'll come back to Imith because his experience is very, very different than the cat Ginger. Like, the Battle of Armageddon happens. Tyrion has seen enough. He comes out of hiding. They have a small number against the Calormen that are here, but they're just going to fight. They have no other option. So they fight, and they lose. They lose horribly. The ape gets thrown into the stable. And when he gets thrown into the stable, there's this loud, like, squawking of a bird sound. There's, like, this clap of thunder, another little tremor, and light starts to pour out of the stable. Now everybody's terrified, and even Rishta has the wool pulled off of his eyes, and he sees the truth. There is something there now. So he drops this nonsense about Tashland. He drops all of that nonsense, and he goes, get these Narnians, throw them into that stable, and then we'll burn it as an offering to Tash, because now he wants to find a way to get Tash's approval after all of his unbelief. So he's dropped all pretense. He's not playing around. Now that he sees there is truly something supernatural in that stable, he's not goofing around anymore. And so one by one, Eustace, Jill, all of them, they're thrown into the stable. But when they're thrown into the stable, when Tyrion goes into the stable, he grabs Rishta and pulls Rishta in, and they both face Tash. And Tash grabs a hold of Rishta, goes to get Tyrion, and this strong voice says, in the name of Aslan and in the name of his father, the Emperor beyond the sea, take your lawful prey and leave. And then he leaves. And what Tyrion finds is he's in the most beautiful place he could ever fathom. Crisp, beautiful air, blue sky, the breeze, it feels fantastic. These beautiful people are standing in front of him, and they are all the children from all the books of Narnia, except Susan. This whole thing about Susan is depressing. And Lewis actually addresses it, and it's deep. You want to know what it is? It's deep. Susan didn't care about Narnia. She wrote it off as a fairy tale and said, what fun games we used to play, what vivid imaginations we used to have, and that you guys still have. Good for you. Do you know what she cared about? Looking pretty, being pretty, and really got so absorbed in herself. So she wasn't here. That's depressing, isn't it? All the experiences she had, it changed all of these people, and she got really self-involved in our world. She just lost it all. How insane is that? But how deep is that? Poor Susan. Anyway, all of the children who even were told they can't come back to Narnia, they're all here together. And the place is so beautiful, they even see fruit, and they're like, that can't be for us. I mean, the fruit itself looks so good, smells so delicious, and is so beautiful that it has this sacredness on it. But it's deep inside, they know they've come into the land where, yes, this is for them. Nothing is forbidden here. But it's like, could it be? They eat it. It's the most amazing food they've ever had. They're blown away by their surroundings. Now, those dwarves, the ones that refused to believe in Aslan, they were part of this battle of Armageddon. And they fought the Calormen. And they fought the Narnians. And they were part of the reason the Narnians lost. because the dwarves are for the dwarves. They refuse to be taken in by anyone. Somewhere in the midst of that fight, they got thrown into the stable too. And they were going to be offering the tash. But here they are sitting in this gorgeous, beautiful, heavenly surrounding, and they think they're inside a gross, disgusting, smelly stable, drinking trough water, sitting around horse manure and donkey manure. That's literally what they see. They see pitch darkness, and they smell the smells of a stable. But they're really in heaven. They're really in the most beautiful place they could ever fathom. But they are so scared of being taken in, fooled, and manipulated that they've created a prison in their minds. They have gone so overboard with this. And when Aslan shows up, he says, I can't do anything for them because they created this prison in their minds. And now they're really stuck in that prison, so scared of being taken in, they refuse to be taken up. They won't let themselves be taken out. I mean, Aslan even, shook his mane, and beautiful food and stuff appeared on their laps, and they thought, oh, look at me, I found a rotten apple core. This is what we've really come to. It's really depressing. They're in heaven, but they're in a hell of their own making. It is incredibly smartly written. Anyway, this is the first time Tyrion ever sees Aslan. It's this amazing moment that I sit there and I go, is this what it's going to be like the first time I see Jesus? I mean, it's powerful. And then Aslan ends Narnia. He calls the people home. And it's interesting because basically they kick open the door to the stable. Aslan stands at the door. The light from his country, or the light from the new Narnia, shines out. And so his shadow is going off to Aslan's left. And so he calls the creatures in. And it's this amazing scene because as all the creatures of Narnia are running in, some looked up at his face and they were fearful but full of love for him. And they came right into Aslan's right, through the door into the country. Then there were those that looked up at Aslan's face, and they were scared, and they hated him. And they went to Aslan's left, into his shadow, and they disappeared and were never heard of again. Oh my God, right? When all of this is done, Narnia ends, Peter shuts the door, and Aslan laughs with delight, and he says, come, further up, further in, and he races off towards the west, and everybody starts to race to follow him, and our main characters are all sitting here like, what is happening? Where are we? And one of the first things they find is Emeth. Now, you remember Emeth, this was the guy who had a different experience going into the stable. And you remember Emeth, he's a Calorman. He has served Tash all of his life. So what I take from this scene is Emeth, who has served Tash all of his life, gets into heaven and meets Aslan face to face. And when he meets Aslan, he could have had one or two reactions. He could have been like the animals that came in and saw his face and was scared and hated him. He could have looked at Aslan's face and said, oh, you're that demon, that Narnian demon. I hate you. Maybe tried to go to war with him. Who knows? And then he could have had the same fate as those that disappeared under Aslan's shadow. He had that choice. Instead, Aslan told them all find what they seek. And when he was searching for Tash, really, his whole life he was searching for God. He was truly seeking God for the sake of God. And Jesus says in the Bible, knock and the door will be opened. Seek and you will find. It's that promise. Seek and you will find. So I think what we actually see here is that when Emeth actually sees the lion, he knows he's seeing the truth, and he regrets and is repentant of the fact that he was seeking Tash. And Aslan says this to him, beloved, said the glorious one, unless thy desire had been from me, thou wouldest not have sought so long and so truly, for all find what they truly seek. And I love this last part. And this is the marvel of marvels, that he called me beloved, me, who am but as a dog. He recognized Aslan for who Aslan was, and instead of calling him a demon, he said, it is better to see the lion once and to die than to have gone infinity and to have never seen him. That was the choice Emeth made, and so Emeth got to come into heaven. Now, like I said, take that scene for what you want. I think it's just a creative exploration. That C.S. Lewis was just exploring these things creatively. I believe firmly what the Bible says. There is no other name given under heaven whereby we can be saved. It's the name of Jesus. But I know he's so good and so merciful. So when I look at this creative exploration, it's like, this is a very interesting thing. Now, this is my favorite part of the book, right? The world has ended. And here they find themselves in heaven, and yet Edmund, Peter, and all of them are looking around like, this is flipping Narnia. Those are the so-and-so mountains. This is the so-and-so place. Like, they're recognizing these places, but they're like, why does it look the same and not the same? And it turns out it's like Plato. Like, that's what they reference. It's like Plato. It's the fact that they were in the Shadowlands. They were in the copy, and now they're in the real thing. So all of Narnia was a land built off the model of this true land. This is the real land. And I love how C.S. Lewis tried to describe it, because even as C.S. Lewis is describing this whole heavenly Narnia, he can't describe it. Which to me, even though this is total fiction, just him not being able to describe it adds that much more authenticity to where they are, to the paradise that they're in. And the best he says, it's like, okay, imagine you're like looking in a mirror and you see the reflection of the beach behind you. But then you turn around and you actually go to the beach. Yeah, you had the idea of what it looked like, but once you're actually at the beach, it's bigger. It's more real because you're not just looking at a reflection, you're standing in the real thing. That's what he's saying. Narnia was the Shadowlands. Narnia was the copy. Now they're in the real thing. And I think it was Jewel the Unicorn who said, oh my gosh, I didn't know it until now. This is home. This is why I love Narnia. This is why I found this or that beautiful. Because really, I was craving this. Somewhere inside, I knew about this. I knew about this real land. This is the real home. This is what I've desired all my life. I belong. I am home. And he takes off running west towards Aslan, further up and further in. And they find that as they run, they have more strength and more energy. They're not getting tired. And it's like the most beautiful picture. They come to this massive waterfall. And, you know, they have to keep going west. They know that. And they're like, how are we going to do this? And Lucy's like, wait. I can't feel afraid. Just try. Like, try your hardest. You'll find that you can't. And so they feel thrilled. They feel excitement that they tried and they couldn't feel afraid. So they take the waterfall in their stride. They swim up a waterfall. It's like the most amazing description ever as they're going up a waterfall, and they're going up so high that in like the Shadowlands, they would have felt fear. They would have felt trepidation at the heights. But now as they're going up, you know what they're feeling? They're feeling excitement. They're shaking with excitement. They're shaking with exhilaration and joy. They make it over the top of the cliff, and the magician's nephew had this Garden of Eden type garden. It was a walled garden. They reached that garden in the perfect Narnia. So they reach like the even more perfect version of that garden. And when they get there, Reepicheep the mouse opens the gates. Reepicheep, who went over the water wall into Aslan's country at the end of Voyage of the Dawn Treader, opens the gates. They rush in, and Tyrion sees his father. The last time he saw his father, he was old, sick, and dying. Now his father is young, strong, and jovial, like even younger than Tyrion even remembered seeing him, and they're just excited, and they're hugging. And then, you know, you have Mr. Tumnus, and Lucy runs to Mr. Tumnus and gives him the greatest hug ever. And they just keep meeting, like Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, and like all the classic characters. The kids run into them. Their old jokes are revived, and it's just this incredibly joyous encounter till they realize going into the walled garden, it's larger inside the walled garden than it was outside. And this is an even realer, complete, full Narnia inside of here. So in other words, there's even more to explore, more beauty to run through and enjoy, more adventures to have than they ever realized. What happens when they meet the walled garden in this one and go inside that, and it's yet bigger inside? I mean, the possibilities are just mind-blowing. Now here comes one of the heaviest moments, because Lucy looks over and finds she has like binocular vision. She sees past the new Narnia to the new Aslan's country, and then finds that Aslan's country is like this ring connected to all these places, and there's the real England. And in the real England, she sees her mom and dad. What the what? And then Aslan comes, and they're like, hey, can we stay this time? I mean, you always send us back. Can we please stay? And now we really find out why Peter, Edmund, and Lucy, and Eustace, and the ones that were said they can't come back, why they're really here. Aslan says, haven't you guessed? This would be depressing if we hadn't encountered what we already encountered. They got the magic rings back in, Earth England, right? And so Jill and Eustace, along with Professor Diggory and Polly, they get on a train. And it turns out, actually, Peter and Edmund's mom and dad are on this train. And they're going to meet Peter and Edmund and Lucy. They're going to meet them at this train station. So really, all these characters that we've come to know are together. Now, Jill and Eustace had talked about how they thought they felt a weird jerk in the train, but then they were in Narnia. So they just figured it was the magic pulling them out. And Peter goes, well, now that you say that, I remember seeing your train come around the bend, and it came around, I thought, too great of a speed. And Edmund's like, yeah, it did. And for some reason, I remember a loud noise and something hit me. And then when I found myself in this country, I had this weird, soreness in my knee, and it was gone. And then Diggory and Polly are like, well, you kids won't understand this because we were old. And so here we were on the train, we felt that same jerk, but then all of a sudden it's like we unstiffened. All the stiffness and brittleness that was in us is gone, and we felt good again. And Aslan's like, haven't you guessed? There was a real train accident. You are what they call in the Shadowlands dead. This is the big twist! Every Narnia character, except Susan, every Narnia character that we have come to love from Earth dies in the last book. And one fell incident. One fell swoop, this train crashes and kills everyone. We see stuff like this on the news. We hear of trains derailing. It's depressing. It's awful. You watch Unbreakable. Everybody's dead. It's horrible, except that one guy. It's awful, right? But we just got all this description of heaven, and we're so full of joy with the joy that they're experiencing. And they're like, wait, that means we get to stay? There's no better way to do this than how C.S. Lewis wrote it. So you ready for this? Here we go. And as he, Aslan, spoke, he no longer looked to them like a lion. But the things that began to happen after that were so great and beautiful that I cannot write them. And for us, this is the end of all the stories. And we can most truly say that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All their life in this world and all their adventures in Narnia had only been the cover and the title page. Now, at last, they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. That is the last lines of all the Chronicles of Narnia. You could look at that and go, how depressing. It ends in a railway accident that kills every character we love. But that's not what we saw, is it? We saw their perspective. We saw them in heaven. We saw them in the real Narnia. Not the Shadowlands, the real. Where death is no longer a term that has meaning, as they're standing in a place that is so abundantly full of life with one that loves them more than we could ever possibly fathom. To read this book about the end of the world and death and to come away with hope, with joy, is an incredible experience, is it not? But that's what Jesus gives. That's why having a relationship with him is the most important thing. He is real. Just because people twist his name and twist his words and twist his character for manipulation, it doesn't make him any less real. Get to know the real him. Get to know him for what he's really like. Get to know his heart. Know that he loves you and he cares for you. And just because he's real, it doesn't mean we won't go through hard times in this earth. But he said, yeah, in the world you will have trouble, but take heart because I have overcome the world. When we have him, we got the greatest hope we could ever have. That's why it is so crucial to believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead and to say with your mouth, Jesus, you are my Lord. So what did you think of the Chronicles of Narnia from the first book to the last book? Oh my gosh. Did you enjoy this book series? Have you enjoyed these reviews? I've done a whole bunch of Narnia reviews. Be sure to check them out. I'm waiting for more news on Netflix having the Narnia rights. I'm looking forward to what is Netflix going to do with Narnia. I'm really hoping they stay strong with what C.S. Lewis wrote and don't try to do their own thing. So I'm very anxious to see what is Netflix going to do with this. And definitely, as more news on that comes out, I will be talking more Narnia. So whew, and if that changes and it never pops up on Netflix, I guess I'll talk about that too. But yes, What did you think, and what is your favorite Narnia book? Let's talk in the comments. While you're there, hit the subscribe button to become a Durbanian. Hit that bell by the subscribe button so you're notified for my next movie review, book review, theological analysis, or anything else I do here. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.